Hello there, thank God you made it just in time. The name is Captain Barn, and I and my crew here recently crash-landed on the planet. Our pilot Igor here is still a bit wet behind the ears. So, at the moment we're currently stuck on this floating rock, but we're looking for a way off ASAP. Thankfully, we were already on our way to this planet, which is a Gungan colony. It's incredibly far from Naboo, but not that we really mind, as at least we're surrounded by friends. For the most part, it would appear that the Separatists are here as well, possibly in secret underground bases maybe, or even factories disguised in the mountains. Only time will tell, but it would be nice if we could get off the planet before the filthy clankers start coming for us. Thankfully for us, it would appear this planet has vibrant amounts of vegetation that we can use to build a few structures. This will be much better than setting up a few tents. Though, obviously, wooden huts aren't exactly the most stable structure. It's better than nothing. And since the Gungan normally build their homes in more aquatic areas, I don't really think they'll mind much of us having a teeny tiny little makeshift camp here. After we finished throwing together our huts, we were quite peckish. Luckily, this planet also appears to have some edible foliage as well. They were actually pretty delicious and sure as shit beat the nutrient paste and protein bars we're used to eating. Now then, brothers, with our bellies full and our heads clear, it's time for us to come together with a plan to get back to the Republic. The most obvious course of action is obviously going to be to restore our shuttle, though I don't think we'll be able to use all the parts and whatnot that we currently have on it, so we might just want to try to refurbish it into something a little bit different. It hardly matters right now though, as we need a lot of resources to do so we'll get back to that in a moment, but I think that'll be our end goal. As for right now though, we need to focus on other priorities like staying alive, ensuring we have enough food to eat so that we don't starve before we can leave, as well as prepping for the arrival of many a clanker, I'm sure. These mountains appear to be rich with different types of ore and compacted machinery, so we immediately started mining out these veins for their glorious resources, then allowing us to form some power generation methods like a wood-fired generator. This seemed like the best option since the sun goes down at one point on this planet and solar power isn't exactly ideal, while we could just keep burning wood all throughout the night. We would also set up many useful production areas for ourselves, like an outdoor kitchen where we could collect all of these berries that we've been eating and cook them into proper meals, which, let me tell you, taste so much better. Not only did it taste better, but it would give us plenty of energy to continue our righteous mission. With full tummies, we could start deconstructing some of the ruins in this area. A bit odd, it seems that this planet most likely had some type of civilization on it before that had some decent technology. Perhaps the Gungan have collected some of this and might be willing to trade it with us. It could be useful for our shuttle, of course. Speaking of which, it would seem that the Gungan Union had sent over something of a diplomat to make contact with us. Upon realizing that we are with the Republic, obviously everyone was all smiles and, we just kinda chatted because, well, we didn't have anything to trade. A few days later, and we would start using a lot of the stone and other resources that we had collected from the ancient ruins of a past civilization to start protecting ourselves with a proper wall. We also used some of the wood to start building some basic and simple traps. I highly doubt these are going to kill any droids, but they might be able to damage them a bit and crack the steel they're made of. Some of the remaining stone that we had, we decided to build ourselves some stone flooring in our hut. Since it seems like we're going to be here for quite a while before we can leave, we at least want the place to look good. But a little bit of time later, and it would seem that the Separatists have finally located our position and sent a party of demolition droids to try to kill us. A couple of them have blasters, but the other two seem to only have grenades, so if we keep our distance, we should be okay. As they approached the base for inspection, we hid near some rocks in the area to jump out and start firing at them, but as they started closing in, we decided to run in behind our walls. This was the safest course of action, and as they began coming in, they would end up hitting one of our spike traps, and that's about it. So we had to kind of start rushing around the area here. Luckily, they're pretty easy to outmaneuver, maneuver, and like I said, as long as we kept our distance, everything was a-okay. By the end of the fighting though, myself and my men had taken a bit of damage. Luckily though, I think we'll be fine, and we now have 4 dead clankers in our midst. They'll be absolutely perfect to deconstruct and use their resources to help with our shuttle. But we're going to need to set up a much better base with a proper storage area as well as a machining table, which was the next item on our list to build. Now that we've completed this, we can start deconstructing these bastards. We'll mostly only be able to salvage steel from them, but occasionally we will also get plasteel from finishing them off, which both are required for the shuttle itself, as well as a few other items like components, advanced components, and uranium, 2 of which we are hoping and praying the Gungan might have some of that we can trade for. Eventually, as the days passed, we continued deconstructing other structures in the area and collecting the refurbished resources from them to use for another wall on the western side of this little valley here, which we've decided to settle in for the time being. The idea is to try to funnel any of the clankers that are on foot through this area here where they'll hit our traps and we can spring out and begin firing at them, of course. That's assuming and also hoping that they don't drop in right on top of our heads. As we were constructing our defenses, we had an army sergeant by the name of Nelson offering to join us here, completely free of charge. At the very least, we decided to speak with the gentleman. Well, he's no Gungan, there is always the possibility that he's a separatist spy, but we'll take his word for it for now. It seems like he's crash-landed here as well. Here's hoping he doesn't betray us and shoot us in the back of the head, I suppose. We'll keep a close eye on him regardless. Since we're not exactly sure on where his loyalties lie, we decided to build him his own little hut. That way he's not sleeping next to one of us where he could easily take us out in the middle of the night. We would, however, discover a way for him to quickly prove his loyalty to us, though, as there was a weather controller in the area, no doubt set up by the separatists to try to drive us away and or to try to mess with our perception so they could come in and kill us. We would waste absolutely 0 time heading out east to confront them and to destroy this damn dirty weather controller. Upon our arrival, it appeared to be a relatively undefended structure, though there were many a clanker in the area. It is only a simple little building with no automated defenses, other than the droids, of course. Alright, Nelson, time for you to prove that you are a true ally of the Republic. The droids would give us basically no time to prepare. We immediately had to take cover behind some ancient wreckage to begin firing at them from over top it. They had us pinned down for a good bit of time there, but thanks to our superior intelligence and battle prowess, we would end up taking out many of them. Now we can begin pushing toward the weather controller, where only a couple more droids had remained. After finishing off their forces, it was time to finish this battle once and for all. Funny enough, after destroying the controller, we would actually get some steel, plasteel, and components. This will go into our rebuilding the shuttle fund. Since we're already out on the road, we also decided to head to a nearby Gungan base where we could see what they actually have to trade. This will really determine whether or not we can even leave anytime soon. Thankfully, it does appear that they've managed to salvage some advanced components as well as uranium. The only problem, though, is we have nothing to trade for it, and we can't afford it, but we should be able to purchase it and or trade for it later on. As we were heading back to base, we had been ambushed just outside of our territory that we've claimed by a super heavy battle droid. Only one, though. Since it is very large and sluggish, it wouldn't take us long at all to blast it into oblivion, and then finally finish it off once and for all. Time for us to head back home. Upon our arrival about a day or so later, we ended up starting a small field of our own food. We don't know that much about this planet, and anything could happen, such as a volcanic winter. It could be right around the corner, and we could end up having all the wildlife and vegetation in the area dying, causing us to starve. And we would really prefer if that didn't happen, or that if it did, we had plenty of rice in storage that we could live on for a while. Some time later, though, and we had a Gungan bulk goods trader, which was absolutely perfect because them coming to our base here means that we can sell all the plain leather that we hadn't packed off to their base previously, making us a pretty little penny. We would still need a good bit more money to go about purchasing all the resources that we needed, but luckily we had detected a vein of plasteel in the northwestern quadrant of this territory. Wasting absolutely no time, me and my men went there and began mining it out. Now, much of this plasteel was going to be used on our shuttle, but that was only 100 plasteel. Thankfully, we had quite a bit left over that we could sell and or trade. My men would take and pack their pockets and packs full of the plasteel over to the nearby Gungam base and begin selling it and or trading it for plenty of advanced components. Actually, just one, it was all that we needed, but about 80 or so uranium. And because plasteel is worth so much, we still had plenty left over to trade off for a bit of juggernaut serum. Something tells me that we're going to need it. Meanwhile, as we were doing this trading for these crucial resources back home, Nelson was building a biofuel refinery where he would be able to refine many of the organics in the area, such as all the wood that we had already cut down, into chem fuel to power our refurbished shuttle. Once we had finally returned back home with all the uranium and the advanced component, it was finally time for us to finish off our refurbishing, and we now have our shuttle back at full capacity. Well, sorta. Unfortunately, the current crew capacity is only 2, so we need to start upgrading it with some proper crew cabins. That way we could fit all of our men as well as Nelson, of course. This wasn't too big of a deal. It was pretty easy to accomplish. We just needed a good bit of steel. With the capacity finally upgraded and we could fit all our crew in and the shuttle fully fueled, the only thing we really needed to do now was to work on the cargo capacity and also harvest all of our rice and get all of our things loaded up. For you see, we're not taking the shuttle into space to try to get back to the Republic. We would run out of fuel well before we made it anywhere near any capital ships or anything like that. No, there is actually a landed ship on the planet and we're simply going to be taking the shuttle over there and hope that we could commandeer this vessel to take us into the stars back home. Not to worry, there are no real spacefaring civilizations on this planet, of course, that we would be stealing it from, at least, so it only belongs to an AI, meaning it really belongs to no one, right? Now, with everything loaded, it was time for us to head in that direction. We would have to make many a stop on the way there to refuel, but eventually we would end up arriving. And indeed, as we had thought, this vessel is completely unmanned and is nothing more than an AI with a ship. Either way, though, it was time for us to start this vessel so we could get the hell out of here. But, of course, as always, this process takes up to 15 days for it to get the energy necessary to take off to get out of here. And during that time, it is going to send a signal across the planet that all will be able to detect, including the Separatists. Basically, we're going to have quite a few fights on our hands, so we should go ahead and start preparing by cutting down trees and readying some defenses as well as a camp for ourselves. Now, I'm going to do my absolute best to try to compartmentalize or summarize the next 15 days or so, as it's going to be pretty boring if I show you every single little fight that we're experiencing, especially against smaller groups of separatist clankers. So, to begin, the very next morning, we already had some very small sabotage droids that were coming right for us. Now, luckily, they had no ranged capabilities, so it was actually quite easy for us to disperse of this large group of them with our superior ranged blasters, of course. And after blasting this scourge into oblivion, of course, we could collect all of their metallic corpses to prepare to be deconstructed for any and all resources that they may have. We might have already refurbished the shuttle, but stealing components are always handy. After that, we would pull out an old tried and true tactic of deconstructing ancient ruins to build ourselves some structures. In this particular case, we're actually going to be building some walls around the ship itself. This is our end game. quite literally. If this ship loses its crucial components like its reactor or AI, we're not getting off this planet anytime soon, and that is no bueno. And this wall was much needed because we constantly were getting attacked by the clankers, as you could have guessed. Obviously, this time around we ended up having some super heavy battle droid with a handful of Commander B1 droids. These were honestly some of the most difficult raids that we were getting because before this it was nothing but demolition and sabotage droids, which honestly were not that much of a challenge, although I suppose the Separatists are attempting to crank it up a bit. And oh boy did they. Even though we attempted to keep our distance as best we could, the super heavy battle droids were incredibly dangerous and their blasts were like a train hitting you in the chest. Igor and Nelson had fallen, and eventually it was just me standing at the end. Thankfully, with my pistol, I managed to kill the last remaining super heavy battle droid, but we almost lost right then and there. Nelson was in pretty bad shape, so I immediately started tending to him. Luckily for my brothers, the worst of it was simply a few burns to their skin. Thanks to our superior armor, we didn't really have to worry about bleeding out, unless we got pounded into the dirt by a super heavy fist. Which of course, mind you, does happen on occasion. Days and days and days would go by, and we would continue improving our camp, building ourselves some little huts again, and also an outdoor kitchen once more, as well as growing some crops. But most importantly, we were really finishing up the wall and trying to basically encompass the entire ship, as well as I guess what is now our base within it. That way we could protect it as well as ourselves to the best of our ability. All the while surviving off rice and berries and squirrels and getting into quite a few shootouts with the filthy droids. But we were struggling quite a bit without proper barricades and traps, which really should have been one of the first things that we ended up building. That's okay, we can work on them now. Besides, it won't be long at all now before the ship's reactor is finally fully powered up and ready to take us into the stars. We only need our defenses to last for a little bit longer, assuming we can manage to continue surviving. One raid we ended up having was B1 and super heavy, but they also had a few droideka along with them. Not that this was too big of a deal, but unfortunately during this time, Nelson was in the middle of a mental break, meaning he can't fight for himself. And he was standing right at the entrance of the base where all of our enemies were coming. At the moment, they appear to be a little bit distracted with beating up our barricades, so that might give us a time to jump out behind them and start shooting them, but even this wouldn't exactly work, and we would have to rush back in. They had made it past our defenses, and we had to take cover in some nearby rocks, firing at them when we could. They would end up making their way to the center of our base, attacking our huts, which we didn't mind, but they were also getting a little too close for comfort to our ship. Thankfully though, since they were doing this, they had their backs turned to us, and we could sneak in and start shooting them from behind, finally finishing them off before they could do any real damage, at least damage that we couldn't repair, that is. A little bit of stick welding to the ship's engines and it should be good as new. Once again, during this conflict, Nelson had taken a few bonks on the old noggin, but he had truly proven himself once again. It would seem that he is indeed our ally. He proved it long ago, but you know, we're very much comfortable with him now and willing to take him back to the Republic with us. With all the materials we were getting from tearing apart these droids, we would actually end up giving our shuttle yet another upgrade, a grenade launcher. We plan on filling it full of EMP grenades, which should be perfect for taking out our mechanical nemesis. During one such raid, we ended up having assassin droids dropping in right on top of our base, and we decided to attempt to use this grenade launcher, but our shuttle was getting pounded with blasters and grenades so quickly that we had to have Nelson fly off in it. It was quite literally the only way that we could save our shuttle. My men and myself would attempt to take these bastards on head on, but unfortunately I was downed, and then it would seem that we have lost our brave captain to a grenade explosion, but we had little time to focus on that because even in his death, the battle rages. What remained of our enemies would be quickly and easily finished off by Robbie, who snuck up behind them in the wreckage. Once what remained was finally cleared out, Robbie could begin tending to the wounds of Igor, and we could bring Nelson back in the shuttle, which exploded upon impact, causing a great big fire. With all these injuries and attempting to firefight everything going on at once, I found that the only solution here was to put Igor in one of the cryo-sleep caskets. The advanced medical services of the Republic will be able to better tend to him anyhow. We would also have Nelson enter another of these caskets for similar reasons, and also because he doesn't have any proper armor, making him quite the liability. With only 7 hours remaining before the reactor finally powers up so we can leave, it looks like Robbie's going to be holding down the fort all on his own. Looks like it's just me and you, Captain. I could only think that you would give some type of inspirational, motivating speech right about now, but it's just going to rain, looks like. With an absolutely gargantuan raid of B-1 battle droids and their commanders landing just outside our base, I think it's now or never. Whatever it takes, we are going to ensure that this ship is able to take off in a couple of hours. We will make sure that Nelson and our brother get home safely. Thankfully, we do have some Juggernaut serum left over from our many waves of enemies. Dual-wielding these blaster rifles, high out of my mind on Juggernaut serum. I am going to hold the door. I am going to protect this ship. The seemingly endless hordes of battle droids coming for us like a mechanical tsunami engulfing our square little base. I was terrified out of my mind and I could feel my heart beating out of my chest, but I would not falter. As they began surrounding me, I was being flanked by all sides. Blaster fire hitting me. It felt like my entire body was on fire. I would have to reluctantly retreat just temporarily, now taking cover behind some rocks, trying to peek out whenever I could to fire at this unwavering fleet of enemies. As the rain continued pouring down, it would seem that the ship is almost ready. Just need to hold out a little bit longer. Today I make my last stand, and I protect my brother. Uh-oh. Well, that's not good. Oh, thank God, the reactor literally just powered up. Alright, let's get out of here. Hello, thank you ever so much for watching today's video. I hope you have enjoyed, I truly do. This has been a lot of fun. You know me, if you know the Rat Daddy, you know me, that I love to play with anything Star Wars and RimWorld, especially the clones, as we have a clone army series that deviates a lot from Star Wars lore and actual, like, Star Wars stuff, obviously, but it is a hell of a lot of fun. If you haven't seen that already, you might be interested in checking that out. Or if you have, you might also be interested in being like one of these wonderful patrons here that you're seeing on your screen now. If so, feel free to check the link in the description to become a patron yourself, as you will get plenty of benefits. I love you guys though. I hope you have enjoyed once more, and I shall see you later. Goodbye.